Okay, we push into turn 2 of this Baath reunification game. Initiative is still on the Arab side. Political, there's really nothing going on anymore. There's no chance of a ceasefire. Air superiority. Rolled a die. And the Arabs actually managed to get down to another level here. See, it's not very likely, but... And when the U.S. comes in, I think that's going to change things here. That gives a -2 to the die roll. This is the first turn, D+1 turn. Next turn, the U.S. starts providing some air support. So any chance of air superiority for the Arabs is probably, this is the closest they're going to come to an overall superiority. And very soon, they'll be getting no airstrikes, I would assume. As soon as we can get, the ratings up to the high level for the U.S.-Israeli forces. Jamming. Well, you can see the results of that. There's some headquarters disruptions all around. Did not go well for the Arabs again. They took a shot at the Northern Command and failed. The other shots were at closer things using either the task force in Lebanon or the Syrian headquarters. They only have one good headquarters that can jam something, whereas the Israelis really have two. They have their Northern Command and their Central Command, both able to get strikes. They were able to hit this one because of that. Reinforcements, I don't think there were any. Replenishment and reorg. Okay. So we haven't seen this before. I did a lot of ammo replenishment. Can't do it where the headquarters are disrupted, though, because it is an actual headquarters function. Reorganization is not. I thought it was. Now, I've been forgetting to do battlefield reorganization in this scenario. If you're the winner of the battle, you're able to reorganize one unit that takes a loss in that battle. That could have helped in a couple of cases. Otherwise, though, I've got these little reorg markers, and some of them are underneath headquarters or whatever as well. They may not all stay. That's not really a commitment to reorganizing. That's just indicating that I can reorganize. If I choose not to move and don't get attacked or anything, those will end up reorganizing. I don't think I can reorganize these guys because, well, they don't have a normal command structure. Anyway, they're in a zone of control. You can't do it in anything with a zone of control, which prevents these guys from doing so. And then the final thing is I got to pick a unit. I choose the 5th mech. For the Arabs. That's these guys back here. My hope is, while Mordecai's artillery is all out of ammo, all the way down they are, I can take advantage of them and kind of beat them up. They're unable to fire effectively while they're out of ammo. Of course, they might get some artillery support elsewhere. Ooh, you know what I've been forgetting to do? I've been forgetting to pull up reserves. Not that disrupted headquarters can do it, but there have been set-piece battles that I've done where I could have thrown reserves in and changed things. God, there's so much to this game. And, about the same level as the OCS stuff. But, man, it's just, it's hard to pick it all up. From the couple little battle scenarios I played, and now I'm doing this, and I'm realizing, geez, I'm fucking stuff up left and right. So I feel like I'm in a little bit of trouble here. The 5th Mechanized, I was looking at hitting these artillery here, which are in some difficult position, although they're, I think they're all out of ammo, actually. The problem, though, is I can either move up and attack them straight up using mobile warfare, in which case other artillery and air assets can strike me on the way in, which will suck. Or I can try to set up a set-piece battle. I'm not going to have any advantages in doing so. I'll be able to use artillery from back here and over here to support that fire, that situation. Or I could even move units up if I have additional forces there, which I think I do. Possibly, I'm not going to be able to get into this hex because these guys are going to project a zone, but I could get here. That's not going to get me any kind of benefit in terms of terrain, the flanking advantages. But if I do that, the Mordecai units are allowed to come up. Now, normally you can't just throw units from another division to support in defense, but the Israelis are able to do that. And this is really the first time where there's significant assets that I had back here that I think were able to come into a reinforcing position. You can go up to 2 hexes. This stack, if it attacked, but I don't think it did, I think it just moved into place, would have been threatened. You can't leave a zone of control to do it, though, so the stuff on the front line was all pinned down. This is all artillery back here, I think. Except for the broken unit, which can't do it. So I think I'm going to try mobile attack, but that doesn't seem promising to me. I'm going to get shelled to shit by that. Well, that was actually pretty damn impressive. I slipped through. Artillery shelling took place. Both missed for both hexes, and there were airstrikes associated with hitting the 2 hexes that fired. And we had ammo depletions and all kind of crap like that. And then I blew away the Moshe artillery and headquarters, and they're all cadre level now. They're just about destroyed. The formation has no value anymore. Now that put me here. Now I don't have the movement to keep going, but I could make a follow-up mobile attack. The danger to that is these are very high morale units here. I'm going to have very good odds if I attack, but it's stuff that's liable to repulse me if I don't do a set-piece battle. If I do a set-piece battle, though, launching against this, yes, I get all my advantage, drop its morale down to, jeez, I don't know what those paratroopers are up to now. Unlike the Moshe unit, they're these guys are up at 8. I've got almost no chance of hurting them. On the top level, let's see, they're damaged units. I would need to roll a 2 or less. But at a 6, I've got a fair shot. Now, these guys are in range, though, that they could bring themselves into a set-piece battle, and I can't really handle them. They're a fairly powerful force. On the other hand, I could airstrike them on the way in. How much would that do to them? I'm not sure. I've got the artillery advantage right now. The Israelis have almost no artillery power at all. Jeez, I don't know. For good or ill, I've chosen not to launch a set-piece battle there. But do I want to hit this instead? Oh, I've got movement for these guys. Hold on. These guys made it here for 1, 2, 3. No, I can't because I moved up close to him. My fault. Okay. So I'm close to stacking limits there, by the way, because there's whole brigades in there. You're allowed like 6 brigades in a stacking, though. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to count on the 10th mechanized to finish these guys off. They're just too tough for me to handle at this point. And airstrikes and artillery, none of that's going to help. I have maximum odds. They're just such crack units that they can hold out fairly well. I don't like giving this pass, but, well, I also really don't like the idea of having to hit fresh units from a fresh division coming in as reinforcements. One thing, before all the resources and forces get degraded, as you know, the Israelis are not in great shape right now in that area, but they've got a significant amount of ability right now still. Things are a lot more complicated. Once you start getting your ammo reductions and units don't appear, you know, the headquarters don't have much in the way of resources left that they can commit, and the airstrikes are missing and everything, it becomes very easy because you can just look and say, yeah, I can attack that or I can't attack that. Now, of course, early on in the game, I was making the wrong decisions there. I'm being more careful now because these units are fragile on the offense. There's no question about that. They're fragile overall, except for crazy, crazy elite units like that. So my next draw is these 35th paratroopers here. And I'm considering doing a withdrawal action. They'll take a hit going through the enemy zone of control. But just trying to pull them back. They can't hold the tide forever, but the problem is I got other stuff that's kind of relying on them holding that tide. I kind of would have liked them to move later in the action. So I don't know. That just looks so hopeless, but they're so damn good. They might be able to stand off. Another option would be to withdraw some of the units. They're going to be on the worst chart on the table no matter what. One unit can hold this as well as 3 little units, right? Okay. One thing that's weird with this game is now I'm trying to figure out what to do with my Israelis. Do I want to, pull back, give up the Golan Heights, or at least give up this part, maybe try to seal off where I'm holding, or try to lay some defensive line before I hit that escarpment that, well, it's kind of going the wrong way anyway, isn't it? I think so, but it doesn't really make a difference. An escarpment's an escarpment, up or down. So there is no trigger for victory in this scenario. There are victory conditions, but that's kind of one of the problems with these scenarios is there's nothing that forces them to end. The players will eventually, I assume, say, okay, it's over. When the momentum gets bad enough, it'll be clear that, one side's been really hammered and they can't get any kind of active opposition going. That sounds like complete collapse to me. Like, the only way to win this game is to absolutely win. My guess is that there is another option that isn't kind of spelled out in the rules at all, which is things reach sort of a stalemate line. And that's when you worry about the actual victory conditions. So no matter what, it's going to be up to me when to call the game. I don't know that I'm going to go far enough to reach a stalemate line or a high momentum. But, well, I guess I'm kind of committed to this turn. Yeah, it's not a bad game. It's just, it's hard for me to get too excited. I didn't realize quite how much I was biting off when I started this scenario, to tell you the truth. I forgot about the length factor of the big scenarios of this. Well, for the most part, this turn has been kind of quiet, as most of the activations that have been real, these are high command units, the Israelis have been getting in. They've been kind of trying to stiffen their Golan Heights position a little bit, or moving forces like the aerial division into play. I just got the first real operation that they conducted. Yaron went up and swept Tyre, the PLO occupation there. It's a little tricky because bombardment doesn't work well in the cities, and there's no political cost to it, but which maybe there should be. I don't know. Probably not on the scale of this war, of the operations conducted here. Backlash would certainly come from doing that, but ground troops went in, basically swept aside the defensive position here and then the one here, and quite honestly, it really isn't hard for a division to knock out some PLO resources. The only tricky thing is I really had to commit the whole division to taking Tyre, so I couldn't pursue these guys. But without a headquarters, they're pretty much dissolved anyhow. They're not going to have any opportunity to do anything. Like the Lebanese units, they're just going to collapse under the weight of this kind of warfare. The 3rd Armored is able to do a couple set-piece battles, moving forward, advancing, and hitting again where the headquarters were, that really are destroying the Golani as a command as well. They still got units up here, but they're getting more and more threatened as we break through. And that's also creating a threat over here to the very southernmost part of the heights, where really Israel was planning on maybe launching a counterattack out of there in conjunction with something coming this way. It's looking pretty bad for Israel right now in my book, and that may just be me not really knowing how to operate correctly. Over here, it's not so ugly, because I've got these units throwing the PLO back, which I see as a necessary precondition to launching an attack on this. But although the Lev division is in really bad shape, the 8th Armored has decided to go ahead with their reorganization. So that gives me a little bit of a breather to try to counteract things there. But over here, I don't feel like the Arabs really need the reorganization. They're in good shape, whereas the Israelis are very, very hard pressed. We'll see what kind of moves forward, because I think we're going to see a much stronger position being held. But if we end up at a stalemate line with the Golan Heights falling to Syria, I believe that's a Syrian victory, or the majority of them falling. They need like 20 hexes. They haven't done anything towards Mount Hermon, though. That's tough terrain. You can't stack fully in the mountains. It's an impassable hex. You can only attack it from the roads. Actually, is this? Yeah, no, this is actually just mountains. But still, there's not a lot there, though, and you can cut off its supply for whatever that's worth. I put a marker here for it, too. It doesn't do a hell of a lot. It prevents them from being offensively effective. But they still have defensive value. And it makes it hard to resupply if they have artillery involved. But, yeah, this breakthrough is looking kind of ugly now. I actually could have pushed further in, but I chose not to, pulling back to the Tell, the more defensive location here. That may be a mistake. You might kind of want to keep pushing when you've got an advantage, especially since the U.S. is coming in soon. On the other hand, units can kind of create clutter. And this is an effective unit. If this had been a damaged unit, I probably would have advanced with it. But as an effective unit, I don't really want it in a zone of control. I want to be able, not that everything there has a zone of control. I want to be able to reposition it somewhere without having to withdraw from the line. So I kind of like the strike and pull back maneuver, which feels really funny from, my World War II perspective. And I don't know enough about modern combat to know if you make that kind of incursion to push someone and then withdraw back to your line. That does feel, though, very much like what I described the game as, which is this degradations of the opponent's capabilities. You're not really looking to take land so much in this as to demolish his ability to fight effectively. So, attack here did a great deal of damage to the Israeli division there, the Bardi or whatever. And that's so big because there's all these broken markers in there. I guess I could put one on top of the units that are actually broken. Given that I'm having to dig into the Arab counters now, I just fear that I wouldn't be able to keep track of them effectively that way. I know in some games that I can do that. This one's a tough game for it, for whatever reason. I'm just more likely to pull a unit off the bottom and send it to go do something. So the counter situation, I don't have a real good grasp on how I want to handle it. Anyway, what happened next is the 10th Mechanized coming out of here slammed into this one unit, and it got on the top chart. Actually, only one unit's in it. Because I'm attacking at 7-1, so I get to take some of this back. If I had attacked with all of them, which I didn't need to, it would have been just as bad. This guy's destroyed. This thing was dropped down to a 6 morale from its 8, but these guys were only at 2, so they were able to take 3 hits of damage. That's going to actually reduce the 10th down to a 1 morale, which makes them almost useless. But they're kind of the only unit poised to attack right now, except the... no, that can't. These guys can. Yeah, I thought these were in healthier shape when I positioned the 5th mech over here. With a lucky hit, though, I'll be able to clear that space, but as it stands, the poor morale of the Arab unit, of the Syrian unit, just means that they're not going to be ordered to go in, and they just run instead. And in the exploitation phase, I did another set-piece battle, and ended up driving them out this time. Mainly because 1 level of damage to them, to the Israelis, was sufficient to drop them down to broken. You could say, well, what about that? Well, it ended up being, I rolled the other side, the really good side. So before I had rolled a 9, which does a 7, actually it did a 6. Ooh, it wouldn't have hurt these. Huh. Alright, that unit wasn't destroyed and my morale's at 2. I thought I was guaranteed to be destroyed on that bad roll, but I'm not. I'm only going to be broken. Because there's no effect on any of these charts. They're not going to actually fall apart. Alright. I guess that's what I get for being sloppy. I'm getting to see the Arabs pocketing some of the Golani unit here. Managed to chip away at the edges here. Now, these guys barely have an exit. That looks bad for them. These broken markers that look Arab, that's just because I'm out of the blue-colored stuff. The Israeli front is largely collapsing here. But there's a good second line here. Like I said, I think that the game will eventually devolve into a position where either one side is winning a dominating victory, or we come to some sort of stalemate line, and it starts to become clear that attacking is just not a valuable endeavor. Right now, attacking is proving to be valuable as long as I'm kind of careful about it. A little bit of repositioning. Some of it maybe, I'm fudging the rules because of the whole West Bank thing. I've got the Rachel unit kind of spreading up a little north, where it really probably should have started the game along the Jordan border, etc. Elsewhere, I used some of the central headquarters, I think the central rather than the northern, to entrench the Mordecai units because they can't use their own headquarters engineering capability. And we also pushed some additional units up here to help cover this. Largely, we're trying to form a firewall to prevent things from getting much worse. And hopefully we can turn the tide, assuming that the Arabs decide to attack. They may choose not to, and then they may entrench themselves in the Golan Heights. And then the fight kind of moves just to being in Lebanon, which is kind of weird. Speaking of the Lebanon fight, I just got a Lev activation. I started pulling some units back. These guys are going to have to withdraw, and this is the first time I'm going to see a withdrawal so far in what I've played. This is dangerous because some of these units are down to cadre. They could just be destroyed by the morale checks. The way the morale check works is I'm just going to roll a die and compare it to Lev's morale. Well, Lev's morale is not very good right now. They are basically a collapsing unit, but they're not down at the 1 level yet, which they would be if they if they get attacked again. So I need to pull them back, try to find something else to throw in the way there. Got some artillery here. I ought to move up to support as well, and just see, whether or not I can save their bacon, because things look kind of weak up there, and they'll look a lot weaker once those units are out of there, actually. How do we pretty damn lucky. neither the broken units nor the cadre units were at all damaged. They all made their checks. What didn't were every single one of the South Lebanese Army units, which is kind of fitting because they weren't. I would have been retreating them into Israel. I don't know if they even had a legitimate retreat route. But anyway, they dissolved on their checks. I also was able to take this unit here and use some of Lev's engineering capability to entrench them, which is definitely helpful. Well, a fairly brief flurry of Arab units moved at the end. PLO kind of pinning down these paratroopers here, who are really there more as a defensive screen than anything else anyway, so not much help there. But also pushing in against the Lev unit. I'm going to look for what can be reorganized. Those are going to all recover the units with the markers. That's going to, I think, help the Arabs more than the Israelis. They got most of the Israeli units that were reorganizing. Well, I don't think there were many, to tell you the truth. This definitely slowed down the Arab advance, though, to take that pause, but I wasn't really seeing a chance of pushing through, say, Mordecai. I might have been able to crack this a little more, but I doubt it. Got, what is this, the 9th Armored Division heading out to Mount Herman. That would be nice, but I don't know how likely I am to be able to take that. It's got a deliberate fortification, which is a strong advantage. Now, if I can get forces coming from both directions, I think I can take it out. I also wasted my last couple airstrikes bombing that. However, the Israelis actually fully wasted their airstrikes. Alright, a little bit of cleanup, and then we go to the third turn of the war. Okay, so for initiative, the Arabs still are above 10. So they're going to have the initiative here. Above 0 is sufficient. Air superiority. This got bumped heavily because the U.S. is in the game now. They got a whole bunch of fun toys to possibly get. Remember, it's random what they actually pick up. And for jamming, the Arabs did quite well here, blasting a number of these. The Israelis failed, got hit with a short-range ballistic missile, which they shot down. Reinforcements, nothing. Replenishment and reorg, a lot going on here. Again, these don't have to remain, but you can see most of the Israeli front line is actually reorganizing, which is kind of a sign of how beat up they are. Some of it can't, like this huge stack here. Really ought to fish through the, I don't know. I don't know how to do it all with one counter comfortably. I've been through that. But they've actually gotten a number of their units back under reorganization. Losing the Mordecai headquarters to disruption is going to be painful. That's going to mean they can't use them as they threatened to last turn, although with them entrenched it's not that big a deal. A little bit of, actually I don't think anybody, we had like one ammo replenishment. I don't want to waste headquarters capacity on replenishing units that are far from being able to fire. So even disordered units I'm not spending the replenishment points on at this point. It happens immediately, so it's really not that big a deal. I didn't see any cases where I really wanted to recover ammunition for units that have been mauled already. It might be worthwhile. It's hard to make that judgment. Yeah, that's a reorganizing stack under a bunch of artillery, or under one artillery unit. And pretty much this is the units that I'm considering as my first action. And then the rest will go in the cup. I threw the big headquarters in the cup already, as well as all the Israeli units. I had come to what I think is an incorrect assumption or presumption about the Lebanese units not being able to recover or reorganize because, well, they don't have a headquarters. But all that the recovery rule says is that you have to be in command, and they are automatically in command. Same with the PLO. Therefore, I'm assuming as long as they can stay out of trouble, they'll be able to reorganize. I wouldn't have been allowed to because I advanced with them. Part of the reason I did that was for the reorganization, but I'm allowing them now. I'm having a really hard time deciding what to trigger. The first couple times that I've triggered something, it hasn't gone well as sort of a planned operation. The reason is their first unit can get you in trouble. There's still some Israeli firepower, but more importantly, there are units that are kind of close to being able to do something. So if I hit, say, this stack with this stack, I can do a mobile attack, but Vardy is still a pretty good unit, and probably better than the 3rd Armored. It ranks as 6. Oh, 3rd Armored is a 7. How did it get up that good? And so, you know, I could pick off Golani units, but that seems like something of a waste. The problem is, if I go here to try to get an angle, a flank attack type situation on them, don't worry about this, this is just artillery, but the aerial division is in position to support it, run up, and force me to fight them as well. And I can't fight both. I mean, if I could fight both, I could just run into this with a mobile attack without a problem. From the other direction, well, I could do this. That probably wouldn't be so terrible, but I can't get in there because Jordan's out of play. And also, these things are just headquarters and artillery, so they're not going to be good mobile units to make the attack with. And then I'm kind of left with the, well, if I can't hit it now, when will I be able to hit it? Just nothing is jumping out and saying, yeah, I need this one to go first. It's a nice ability, but I'm just not seeing anything. Given a chance to do something, I did something foolish. So the reason I like set piece battles is I can put the units in one at a time and prepare for it. Moving a whole armored formation like this opened it up to artillery strikes, and boom, boom, gone. You know, it's just wrecked. There was an interesting chance to get an attack on these, but now cheap artillery strikes that didn't even cost me an out of ammo marker took out that whole division at once. The kind of move that, you know, presumably the actual operational commanders would never make, but I'm too stupid to keep everything in mind. So I just go ahead and do it and then regret it right afterwards. Pulling the 7th mech into operation was much more effective. I blew up 2 more units with set piece battles that I was already set for. There was nothing nearby that could really react. And I've pretty much destroyed Golani as a command. It's down to a 2 quality. Again, that's almost impossible to recover. Unless it's involved in a battle, perhaps with someone else, you know, well, you know, with some quality auxiliary units, some loose things like territorial brigades or something that aren't terribly high quality, but they could pick on a weak unit and, well, a stack of weak units and maybe be able to sway the morale. That doesn't help the 7th mech's morale, and in fact, they are quality, and they've been kind of getting chewed up in the attacks. But at least I'm blowing stuff away and gaining, you know, some sort of advantage here. Another example of my obstinate idiocy, I moved the 5th mechanized here up against this one unit. Now the idea here was, hey, I can't set up for a set piece battle because of the Mordecai. Well, I don't know if those can be committed, but this one could have been. So I moved forward, artillery strikes, Okay, great. I try to degrade them with an airstrike. That doesn't work. But now I'm in this space. I launch an attack. I'm using all my units because I'm going to need that to get through to here and continue my mobile attacks, right? Well, this one high-quality unit managed to completely rout the entire force, thereby reducing the 5th mech's tech, just off a bad die roll. It doesn't, there's no assurances when you're on the top chart here. There's no automatic overruns or anything like that. That's hard to face, to tell you the truth. Basically, what I think should be available is the ability to attack this, maybe with a small advance force or something like that, that can continue on in conjunction with the rest of the force. An overrun rule would essentially handle that. This is a tiny, tiny unit. It's one strength point of elite paratroopers. I don't know, how many men, but this is a whole division hitting this small unit. That thing's got no chance. However, it's got a fairly good chance of holding out, it turns out, against any number of enemies. There's nothing you can do in the system to kind of affect what I want to happen. So I have to take my odds that my entire force gets broken by this one unit in order to get it the next stack, which also I would have to take my chances to destroy as well. But at least there's significant forces there in the next unit. Because of the reactive nature of strikes, you can't really just launch a preemptive strike all along the line with artillery and air power, as far as I understand it. I'm having trouble coming to grips with this, because obviously then you could just knock out the other guy's capability of interfering with your movement beforehand, which might actually feel better. So what you do is you move a stack, try to get coordinated artillery fire against your stack, which the aerial unit managed to do here, and then you send in something like an airstrike to react against the artillery. You take that out, which is what happened here, and now I've degraded the Syrian capability fairly heavily to prevent things in this area. But there's still a good deal of artillery down here. Now, I've degraded it not just for this turn, but next turn too, because it's going to have to reorganize before it's able to fire, which is a lot of what happened to the Israeli forces here, why they weren't able to react. They were knocked out for more than one turn. In fact, one of the reasons I was trying to close was to prevent some of these reorgs from coming around. But now there's enough stuff up here that I can fire and directly affect them. I also have significant Israeli and U.S. airstrikes. So it looks like it's going to be a hard row to hoe for the Arabs at this point. The exception to that is set-piece strikes. When you're activated, you can unleash firepower to begin with. And I haven't quite come up with what the proper balance for that is. I think you can silence the enemy. The problem is, those set-piece strikes give you a +1 on the strike table roll, which make it much more likely for you to run out of ammo, and much more which kind of emasculates you in the area, because you won't have your artillery available anymore. And it also makes it less likely that you'll actually affect the enemy unit. So it's a really hard kind of balance there between, hey, do I want to just try to knock out the other guy's capability, which sometimes I'm more in the mood for, or as in this game where I want to kind of tempt them to make strikes, because recovery is actually a possibility here. I don't feel either side has enough overwhelming firepower to be able to just neuter the other one completely at this point, although that may be building up on the Israeli side. An interesting set of attacks running across here against this Lev unit. I think there was a mobile attack first, which the 4th Armored actually got away with. It failed its attack. That should be a point of momentum that I didn't count. That doesn't cause any any great advantage. Then it settled into a set piece attack and launched that against the Lev unit as well. The set piece allowed me to do some initial airstrike bombardment, which reduced the unit, and then an attack which failed to gain anything, thereby being a 4-point morale, momentum, whatever effector, dropping the 4th Armored. There were several airstrikes that came underway from this. Syria's out of planes, Iraq is almost out, but we're also using up the Israeli and US strikes. No real effect on the artillery though, which means that we're still pretty well defensively positioned for both sides. Now, I could have pulled those Mordecai units out of there, but I forgot about that in order to join in the set piece, and that probably would have made life a lot harder on the 4th Armored. This is the Mordecai headquarters. I disrupted that on purpose to prevent them from being able to intervene everywhere. Because I was looking at, geez, I want to hit this way, and I really don't want those units being able to be thrown in. Disrupting the headquarters is sufficient for that. But yeah, we're pretty much out of assets that we can toss in for the Arabs at this point. In terms of the air assets, the artillery is getting degraded pretty heavily, so I think we're about ready to see that tipping point happen, I think. I don't know. It's hard to tell because, I move aerial forward and boom, it stopped, The tide hasn't turned enough. I moved the Natani division up to smack these guys with a prepared attack, as it were, a set-piece battle. Figured I'm taking one off their morale. They've already been kind of hosed a little, or off their quality. They've already been hosed a little bit. Well, I was able to get a strike in on them from what? Certainly not an airstrike. I think it was a ballistic missile. Hit them, reduced them, dropped it down to a 1-to-1 attack, and then a bad roll made it so that they actually are all broken now, which I've run out of counters for that. Mainly because of my unwillingness to put broken or cadre counters on a stack and say it's the whole thing. Same thing with the ammo depletions, etc. There just aren't enough counters for the way that I'm accounting for things. But honestly, I don't think there's enough trouble for me in keeping track of stuff in this game. Stacking order doesn't matter, but in which case you would need individual counters for each thing. But there's too much to keep track of here for me to not do that. So I'm using Great Battles of History old counters for this. And those are just broken counters. Wow. So yeah, it's still difficult to launch any kind of attack. Any kind of attack is likely to fail. And how bad does it fail? Well, that's hard to tell. These units being broken mean they have to recover. But it doesn't make it's not like, the old Avalon Hill attack or eliminate crap on a 2-to-1 attack. So you have a little bit of capability to try to save them, to try to recover them. It's not like there's a tremendous amount of force facing them. Although if these reorgs all come about, there will be quite a bit on that side. The Assad Guard is still available, and I don't think I've pulled that yet. No. The Iraqi 3rd Armored came in and tried to hit these damaged units, and hitting damaged units isn't necessarily a good thing. If they're disordered, that's kind of cool because they're a level less. They're weaker strength. But in this case, we got airstruck in the set-piece battle. We didn't have any advantages, and what we ended up doing was losing another major battle. The feeling that I get is attacking is sort of pointless in this game. It's not always the case. As we saw, there were some successful attacks and breakthroughs, but I'm not able to really grasp what makes an attack terribly successful. Obviously, look, if you can knock out the other guy's capacity completely, that's fine. But if you can't do that, how can you move forward? I think what it's trying to actually capture is this you get a pointless situation where there's too much firepower on the line for both sides, and unless one side can negate the other side's firepower pretty much completely, which, like I said, I think that's impossible, you end up in a stalemate situation, kind of like the Iran-Iraq war was, where neither side can really budge the other one. And I think we're actually seeing that. I don't know if the Israelis can turn this around in any sense, or if what the Iraqis are going to do is try to fortify this location and not push further into the heights. That may be their best situation at this point. As I said, there seems to be a certain turning point here, and if the Israelis can't punch, me back, well, we may have a limited victory from the victory conditions. I think the time period of the surprise of the attack has worn off. There's too much Israeli force here for me to push aside easily. But I guess the biggest problem I have is I don't have a real grasp how to use units. It's similar to how I felt with musket and pike early on. But unlike musket and pike, I'm not, drawn to this scenario or to any of the scenarios in this game in the same way. So I'm not willing to put the commitment in. I feel like this is a game for someone who really, really is interested in the modern warfare at this level. And that just doesn't turn out to be me. I have a great deal of excitement and interest in the game because it does seem to detail so much, but I just can't get to the point where I care enough about it to really explore it fully.
Billy Airpower was able to break up this attack before it took place. These are just broken counters up here.
My replacements for them. Look up the scenario victory conditions, and you only have to meet one of your category's victory conditions. So, for example, the Arabs probably have 20 hexes within the Golan Heights right now. So I'm positioning myself to fortify a little bit. I am over here with the thought of trying to now keep the Assad unit back here in the town, which is better defended. I can build some hasty fortifications next time I get it operational with them. So mainly I'm looking to try to hold on to what I've gained ground-wise. I don't see much more than what I've got as being plausible at this point. So I'm kind of looking at, let's dig in and see if we can prevent the Israelis from getting any ground. If they hurt themselves on us, that's their problem, right? Now, for the Israelis, trying to decide what to do with the 55th Parachute Brigade, because really, I gotta win here now to get my limited victory. I can't. Clearing Lebanon is great and all that, but I've got to prevent the Arabs from holding so much of the heights. So I got to think kind of carefully about what I want to do. Just entrenching here might be sufficient, really. And we pretty much finish things up by driving the Mount Herman garrison out of there, beating it up pretty badly with the 9th Armored. Only used one unit to do it, used some strikes, etc. That's going to kind of clear the way for me to come down and be in a protected position to hit the angle here, maybe. I'm not sure. I'm pretty terrified about the acceleration of U.S. Commitment. Yeah, a couple of big elite divisions coming in is not going to be pleasant for me. Alright, we got the end of turn cleanup, including recovery from all these reorg units out there. Okay, I guess we're about ready to start this turn. I still have to pick an Arab unit to take the initiative action. Right now the Arabs still have the momentum at 11 points. They really haven't been able to move that dial much. They've gotten a little over 20 for a while, but it's fallen back. As we say though, they're in a victorious position right now, and may just try to hold ground, see if the Israelis will break themselves sufficiently on an offensive action here.
gotten reorgs where I can. You can see there's places where I wasn't able to put them because they're in a zone. I need a little out of supply marker there. I think you still have a zone when you're out of supply. Let's see, we also have the big news is the 82nd Airborne in place. Now, what I screwed up last turn was I gave the US their full complement of air power, a full die roll, and they got a fairly high die. They're actually supposed to be at -3 in this turn at -2. I gave them the full -3 this turn, I think. Just, yeah, you know, hey, the carriers were prepared and they had a strike ready. There was plenty of time for them to be ready to launch a full-out strike, so there's questions, you know. There's ways of justifying the error that I made in this situation. I'm sure they had a carrier group ready and prepared. The 82nd Airborne, it's kind of an interesting unit. Some of the units are, it's not as big as these big armored formations, but it's elite quality, and it should be able to accomplish quite a bit. I hope. We'll see. You know, elite doesn't guarantee you anything. You could still end up down at a 5 quality. I like that aspect of the game. I like the moving quality levels that come from it. There's a lot of neat stuff in this game. It's just, I don't really have a grasp on how to operate effectively. As I start to get more comfortable with the game and coming to the conclusion that at this point the Arabs kind of have to dig in to hold their position. That's what I've decided. I've said that to you. Now the question is, well, what do I want to trigger first? And I literally spent about 20 minutes zoning out on every possibility I could come to. I finally decided on something that I don't think is necessarily the most advantageous, which is activating the 7th mech to get this piece of crap out of here. Other opportunities, possibility of trying to punch through here by putting a unit into here, so that maybe something like, well, see, the problem here is I don't have a good division capable of striking here. The 4th Armored is fresh, but it's hitting Lev as opposed to the Mordecai unit. I can't pull out of there. I have to hit Lev first. I'm not really in a position to hit Lev this turn. Maybe I can if, you know, the fallout of all the artillery fire comes out in my advantage. But other opportunities, digging in with Assad's guard, that might be very valuable. If the Israelis are able to turn and launch an attack at this point. But I don't think they are. Too much of their force appears to still be disorganized, or worse, and so I figure I'm going to try to clear up and move forward with some units this turn, and, you know, I'll be able to dig in here at any point in the turn if the Israelis aren't attacking. So my positioning there is safe, and it leaves me a little bit more flexibility to have them available just in case things go terribly wrong for the Israelis, like if they launch an attack and it goes horrible for them. Then I have some flexibility there, so I kind of like that idea. Anyway, I'm assuming this will clear out of there pretty easily, but I can't be sure. Actually pretty successful. Not just blasting that unit away, but the pursuit afterwards allowed an exploitation, which blasted through. There were a couple more Golani units, I think, here that got knocked out. Now I've got a significant, you know, pressure on these units, which means if I can do a set-piece battle against these guys, I can bust them back. I'm wondering why these guys aren't reorging, though. There wasn't anything on them. They should have been given one, I think. What a mess. The Israelis chased some PLO around in Lebanon. Didn't do terribly well in terms of breaking this unit up, but they smashed their way through. They're up in Sidon. Captured that. Pretty much at the extent of this division's range. Elsewhere, it's been static. We've gone through a number of chips with the Arabs beginning to fortify and entrench in their position. Didn't want to leave this space, which is actually a Natani units, which kind of would like to withdraw, prepare themselves for an assault, simply because, hey, you know, I gotta push the Arabs back. The problem is that under there, there's a fortified location. And if I pull my unit out of there, the majority of the division's force, I won't be able to guarantee that I'll be the next guy who gets to move into there. So I kind of want to keep my broken units there. They can't reorganize, but maybe I can break, you know, a hole in the line up there, because the Arab units facing me aren't terribly good either. I'll show you an example of the kind of tough call you got to make. Here's the Geva unit, which just got pulled, and that is this disrupted headquarters, a bunch of artillery under here. In this stack, I'm all set for what looks like a great set-piece battle. But one problem, I call a set-piece battle, and this can move into these two hexes, and then I'm not in great shape anymore. Now, I can fly airstrikes in and bombard those, and maybe I'll get through. But they've just widened the battle significantly, when I probably don't have tremendous odds on that big broken stack there. Part of me says I can't do it, right? It looks too risky. The other part of me says if I don't do it, Israel's never going to regain the heights. This area, this stuff's just going to fortify and it's going to get harder. So yeah, I'm going to go in, but it's not going to be pleasant at all. Indeed, we got no ground here. Nothing of the Arab side got hit at all. These all took a step loss. And the roll wasn't a bad one, but we were outnumbered, not quite 2 to 1. We ended up with a 1.5 to 1 against us. But that's nothing good to have happen. At least we didn't end up out of ammo, which would be really troublesome. Now, I can launch strikes against the artillery that fired, though. And that can happen from both sides. The Arabs don't really have a lot they can fling in here. They are out of airstrikes. They didn't have any this turn at all. I can either use additional airstrikes against the artillery, or what I think is probably well, I could fire one anti-tactical out of here, but that's almost all used up. I want to keep that in play. I don't know why. But otherwise I can fling some airstrikes in and try to knock up their guns a little bit. The offensive is not completely gone. Avram was able to blast through basically 2 full divisions and some additional forces that were next to them and just plow their way forward. I actually have a few more movement points with this thing, which I think I'll move up to there just to help screen my position a little bit. But you can see I just smashed stuff back. Now the stuff that I smashed back, some of it, the first armored, is now 1 quality, which means it just can't fight. You know, there's just nothing you can do with that shit. And we've talked about that before. Well, there are some cases where the defense doesn't really work. So for example, where we saw those cadre units, 3rd and 1st Armored, got shoved back by the Avraham division here. Being in cadre state is just asking for it. And a huge artillery barrage, airstrikes, they've been eliminated. That's 2 divisions, not just knocked down to the 1 status, which is the case in both cases, but all their units are gone. All they have left is artillery. Now, artillery is powerful, but they're just not in a state to. They have no ground forces down here to defend themselves, which means where there's a nice little weight of Israeli units might be able to turn the flank here if the Arabs can't do something, if the Syrians can't do something to cover that. They just don't have the troops there right now. And now we come to some neat stuff. Alright, so the Arab 4th took on a fortified position here. It wasn't all that heavily defended, drove it out, airstrikes dropped them down in quality. But with the exploitation, they're setting up for another set-piece battle against these against, I think this is the Mordecai headquarters. It's all out of out of ammo units. And there isn't much I can throw in. I could throw this Lev unit into play, I believe, but that's about it. Everything else is outside of range. The Mordecai units would be in range, but the headquarters can't give them orders because it's been disrupted. The jamming attacks are so powerful in this game. I'm a little iffy about the way that jamming is handled. It feels like it's too limited in the sense that I feel like you should be able to knock out the opponent's entire capacity to jam using your own capacity to operate using your own headquarters. Instead, you can only pick a few. The reason that I say I feel like it should be more is there's so many of these headquarters disrupted markers, and this is how they happen. However, the game would pretty much be over. One side would jam the other, and then get all kinds of good attacks in. And the attacker has sort of the advantage in being able to jam first. They can target the opponent's headquarters. Of course, the Israelis have 2 primary headquarters, whereas the Arabs have 3 that have jamming capabilities, but only 1 that really has long-range capabilities. So I think the Arabs would lose this all the time as long as Jordan's not in the war. Anyway, based on the jamming, if it was more extensive. Anyway, what we have is the 4th Armored ready to make this attack, and for the first time in the game, we have an F-117A coming in to strike. I've got nothing I can do about it. It's got a +3 air defense factor. I got another +1 from this. None of the units within range, well, none of the headquarters have that kind of air defense capability that they could possibly see this thing. So we're going to get a bombing in on that. Now, it's not a bad bomber. It's got the -2 to the die roll, which is kind of cool. It's only on the B chart, though. And this will break up the attack as it goes in. So, yeah, that's going to stop the attack before it actually can hit. Coming in there. Interesting. The Golani unit here, it's too weak to pull out. It's got a 1 morale. It's almost assured to collapse another level if I try to withdraw from there. So I'm better off just leaving them there and hoping someone else can rescue them than trying to actually withdraw safely. And that makes sense. Withdrawing from a combat is, in the modern era, a very difficult procedure, and sometimes it's better to just hunker down, especially if the enemy forces aren't particularly powerful, because you're not giving them any kind of target of opportunity. But whereas if you withdraw, you almost certainly will. Jumped back. I had the 82nd Airborne up here. This is a dumb place for them. They can't interfere in the West Bank or the Golan Heights or Lebanon or anything like that. And oops, I threw them into Lebanon here. They're only allowed to defend Israel proper, which means in this war, they're really not terribly useful. The Israelis are not that pressed here. Make my way through to the end phase here. A little bit more going on. I'm beginning to realize I still don't understand the rules to this game. 2 things. One, maybe minor, but it would make the game much, much harder to cope with. I've been removing breakthrough markers at the end of an activation. That's supposed to be at the end phase, which kind of means if you generate a breakthrough, everything in that area within 3 hexes of that, during its activation, will get an exploitation phase in terms of being able to move further. Makes sense, but in a way, it kind of doesn't really fit the game to me. To me, the chit pull is already handling that this doesn't really need to be here. So, for example, if I get an attack and I cut a hole in the enemy line, and now I have a breakthrough marker, that allows me to move some more of my units, widen that hole a little bit. If somebody else gets an activation, I'm not sure why in particular they should get that extra movement, basically. I'm fine with it either way. Obviously, the designer thought that the breakthrough makes more sense the way he wrote it. But when I look at what that would mean to playing the game, I'd have all these breakthrough markers hidden under all these piles, basically. Or on top of them, I don't know. But one way or another, they're going to interfere even more in a game that's already very cluttered with markers. I mean, look at this crap, right? The other one is the struck markers. I still don't quite know what they do. I kind of glossed over them in my explanation, and I have not placed one yet. I think what they do is, if you move through the row, those also get removed at the end phase. And I thought what they did, but I can't find it in the rules now, and the rules are not good as a reference, nor particularly in terms of correctness or solidity. And there may be errata that covers that now, I don't know. But what I thought they meant was, hey, I just moved one unit down this road and it got struck. Anyone else who moves through that road gets hit with that artillery. That's what I seem to recall they meant. Well, I would have to keep the result either of the artillery strike, which I don't think is the case, or the amount of strength that's hitting it, recorded somehow. Now, there are a lot of struck markers, but, you know, as you play, they're on the backs of the units in the game, of the activation chips. So they're not really something you want to leave lying around all the time, getting hidden under stacks or whatever, for the same kind of reason, simply because, again, they may not even make it back in the cup. It's bad enough if a breakthrough doesn't get noticed. So again, I'm kind of looking at them as okay, I'm striking that unit's activation. And it just makes more sense to me and seems easier to handle. Anyway, I've got to do that end of game cleanup, and that's why I was looking up to see, hey, what things exactly are there? And there's no rules reference to struck markers, and I spent, I don't know, you know, it's not a very big rule book, but I spent a few minutes looking through it, and I could find no reference to the struck markers, not under artillery fire, etc. I'm sure it's in one of the things. It should be under either artillery fire or movement or reaction, which is to pretty much say somewhere in the rule book, basically. I mean, that covers 80% of the rule book, right? And I can find nothing that calls it out. No picture where they're mentioned here. There's references into different things. Well, references to different things over here in the end cycle. Not to struck markers. Everything else has it, and struck markers. Maybe they're mentioned here. Nope. There's no rules reference for them either. Every other item has a rules reference except air superiority, which could easily have one too. So if I happen to run across that, I'll notate it in my rules. But honestly, I like the way I'm playing it better. It would be interesting to hear. See, what I'm lacking is sort of that overall breakthrough, right? But what would that mean? That would mean my one unit that got an initial breakthrough would then influence all other commands going in there that could actually be creating their own little breakthroughs. It would allow deeper penetration. However, from what we see of the game, there isn't a lot of room for penetration anyhow. It gets pretty damn messy, as you can see here. Zones of control and the like are going to clutter you up. Only right near the breakthrough is the zone negated anyway. It just seems like such a minor thing to deal with that excess, and I'm not even convinced that it's giving an accurate, representation by leaving that breakthrough marker there. Likewise with the struck markers. If I do a strike at one convoy that's traveling at one point, I'm not absolutely certain that those planes would still be able to strike something later in the day moving there, or it would make any sense. And that again disturbs me. If you want that kind of persistence to an attack, you use, I guess, special munitions to drop minefields. I haven't used a minefield yet. I haven't used special munitions yet. There's just so much in this game. It's kind of like playing SFB, Starfleet Battles, in the sense that there's so many little things you could pull out of your ass if you really, really knew the game. But the core kind of holds together without those things. So, such is. All right, let me do the cleanup and I'll come back. One thing I did want to discuss though before. So the game is kind of growing on me a little bit. Last time I played it, or other times I played it, I got to the campaign scenarios, which I haven't touched here, which are fixed scenarios, not as inclusive and big as this. And they just seem kind of blah in the same way as those little scenarios I played felt, like little puzzles. This feels like it's really something that I can't wrap my head around enough to be able to call it at all a puzzle. There might be little ones within it, like, can I move this unit? Can I dislodge, this force that's here and that's annoying me? But I've got this overlying strategy that I've got to play out as well at the same time. And I like a game that has enough meat on it that I'm not just figuring out what feels like an individual little puzzle, like, hey, can I take whatever this is, Kalamar or whatever, or can I breach a few hexes in the Golan Heights, which is the scenario goal here. But now I've got to hold that territory too, and there's just enough in there to kind of spark my interest, to make me play through something that I'm still finding very difficult to play and to come to, which is why the vids are kind of slow. Although I have been expending a great deal of time on this. Kind of like things like Last Chance for Victory. You may not get as much video because there's not that much narrative going on. I can cover it at a kind of a broader scope. Anyway, I'll come back and wrap up the last part of this turn. Make something clear. I think this game is actually not playable as written. Maybe errata somewhere clears it up. Certainly not the errata that I've gotten does so. And for that, it seems kind of strange because it gets very high ratings over on Board Game Geek. It's above a 7, which generally indicates there's a solid game there. I don't know what people are thinking. I feel like you almost have to fill in the gaps in this one. Like many wargamers are not happy with the idea of, the rules aren't complete. Now, you could say the same thing about Europa Universalis. That too is a game that, as written, is unplayable. I think I can very strongly say that. Where you have to fill in the gaps and you have to make your own rules, and that also has a high rating. But it just shows you something about, what gamers are willing to put up with. That you can't just trust the ratings that you've got a playable game here, right? Hopefully I'll remember to say something along those lines when we hit the review. I'm not sure, because, I say what comes to mind and that's it.